Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you very much to all for being here to this open debate on the social impact of artificial intelligence from the DT4Regions conference. We're going to discuss today an acceptable artificial intelligence for, with, and by the citizens. Looking forward to a horizon of potential actions within this project, the DT4Regions. And in this perspective, the idea is just to find out what is this acceptable AI. And in order to work within the framework of DT4Regions to understand what this platform for the European public servants could help in contributing this action and to what extent this will affect our lives, the taxpayers and of our families. Let me introduce myself because we are going to have a very interesting debate, I promise. My name is Fernando Vilariño. I am Associate Director of the Computer Vision Center, and I am the honor and pleasure of moderating this debate. In my work at the Computer Vision Center, we teach computers to see in the way that humans see. And this is something that is applied research that is having an enormous impact in society. It is changing our lives. The artificial intelligence of images and videos are now in medical imaging, in health, in autonomous driving. We can find it also in document analysis and more and more and more and more. So it was important for me and for my institution to understand, in addition to the technology transfer and the work together with our companies and researchers to develop innovative solutions, which is the impact, the social impact that these transformations will have in our cities and communities. And for that reason, we are working with the European Network of Living Labs in order to have a citizen-centric approach to the development of this AI. And this is exactly what we are going to discuss today. So without any further ado, I'm really happy to introduce the board that we're going to have here today, the panel. And let me please start with my colleague on my left. I will introduce you one-on-one. And as usually, we have a very two easy questions to break the ice. So please, the first speaker will be Albert Sabater. Albert Sabater's PhD in Census and Surveys from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom, a Master of Science in Social Research Methods and Statistics from the same university. He also holds a Master in Demography from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, my own university, a very good university, well, and he has been working more than 15 years in the field of big data, collaborating and advising international organizations such as the Economic and Social Research Council of UNESCO, as well as participating in different national and international projects. He is currently the principal investigator of the case study of the project Artificial Intelligence for Assessment, AI Fora, and director of the Catalan Observatory for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. So, Albert, now here we are in this fabulous library of Pedralbes Palace in Barcelona, and we have these two very easy questions that we like to break the ice with. The first one is, which is the role that, or the potential roles that the citizens can have in the Observatory of Ethics in Artificial Intelligence in Barcelona, in Catalonia, and how are you going developing this task within your day-by-day? Please.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you and to talk about the social impact of AI, which is unfortunately not mainstream yet. It's a topic that is developing fast, but it's not so often that we talk about the elements of artificial intelligence from a social perspective. And from the Catalan Observatory for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence, this is an important element because we're looking at the consequences of artificial intelligence in terms of social, the more sort of ethical, social, as well as the legal aspects of implementing on our daily lives, technologies in general, in particular, artificial intelligence. And that should concern us all, not just simply technologists, engineers, computer scientists, because there are several reasons for us to be thinking about these social impacts from first thing in the morning when we leave home, or even before we leave home, we probably check our email, and we will probably be confronting an AI system with some sort of automated criteria that will organize our email. And in some cases, some people have no access to emails that are secure enough. So that's the first ethical dilemma. Are we using some of the giants Gmail systems, or shall we use protected systems? So that's the first social impact that we have is happening at home, because we have only access to particular big tech email systems. But then when we leave home, we'll probably, in some cases, choose to navigate our mobile phone to go from A to B. And that's another element that some people don't really have. Or if they do, they use a navigation system that basically tracks down every single movement that we do without consent. So there's another element of social impact that we'll have to face. And these are just two examples, very daily examples that we have on our daily life, that we try to basically from the Catalan Observatory for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence to let people know that technology is there to help, but have to be aware that there are some disadvantages of using technology without having no awareness of the potential risks of using technology from first thing in the morning. And how we do that is basically by doing some of the traditional things that academics do, basically, that has to do with knowledge transfer, and making sure that we organize enough events like seminar series, that we have enough information on our website, and that we basically interact with people, including civil servants, to let them know that these things are happening in a way that they have to explain the common mortal, the citizen, so that they know and they have more information. But I think we have to do a lot more than that. We have to do a great deal more than that, because the ways we are interacting with technology are not the traditional ways of humans interacting with each other. So we, from the Catalan Observatory, one of the things that we have to already do, and we're already doing some of these things, is to interact through technology, but also using technologies as a way of raising awareness of the potential sort of risks. So showcasing the elements that they have to be aware in terms of these sort of interactions between humans and humans, humans and machines, and machines and machines. So we need to basically make sure that when we talk about social impact of AI, it's not just simply the social impact that takes place between a machine and a human. It's also that our relationships are affected by artificial intelligence. So the relationships that we have now are probably not affected by a machine, but could be affected by a machine. And the relationships that you might have with a machine might be different from the way I interact with the machine, because the understanding or the sort of level of knowledge that you have or I have might be different. There is a disequilibrium of knowledge. So there is where we have to really make sure that when we talk about citizen science, or when we talk about the impact of artificial intelligence in our society, we really make sure that people have as much knowledge and as much information as possible, so that these relationships between humans and machines, and then in the future between machines and machines, are not really affected by disequilibriums of knowledge. So we have to go forward in that way, and that's how we see it in the Catalan Observatory for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's a very nice starting point, going from the relations that we are having. And this is something that probably will be also develop it also at social level with our next guest. If we can have the slides for his presentation, for his bio, please. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. If we can have a full size. Thank you. So I have the pleasure to introduce you also my colleague, Peter Ulrich. Peter works at the European Commission Rowan Research Center. Thank you very much for coming along, Peter, and being with us. So yes, please, again, you can recover the slide. Thank you. In the JRC's Digital Economy Unit, he is currently responsible for the work on AI and emerging technologies in the public sector. Before joining the JRC, Peter developed international research projects on urban futures and advised cities and regions on questions of sustainable development and governance reform. His academic background is in public administration, urban studies, and European studies. So, with this background, let's go for two questions. Peter, for instance, how can AI provide new models of shared governance in our cities and regions? Or for instance, how can AI challenge our democracies? That's an easy starting, isn't it?
Hi there, does this work? Okay, hi. Yeah, we were talking about it over the coffee already. Very, very easy icebreaker questions, no, ready to just, you know, get us going. So my first reaction to the first question, you know, how can AI help us, you know, create new models of shared governance in regions in Europe was no one has ever asked me that question before. And the reason for that is that, at least as far as I can see, this is not a very a debate that is currently going on, right? We're talking about AI in the public sector from a different perspective. And as you said, so I work at the Joint Research Center, and one way of studying AI in the public sector is we've created a landscape of the adoption of AI in the public sector containing 686 use cases that we recently published. There's the camera, doing a bit of product placement here, that we recently published in this report, the European landscape on the use of artificial intelligence by the public sector. Why am I doing this product placement? So we analyze these cases across a different set of variables. And what we're basically seeing is that the majority of the cases that we have found are using artificial intelligence in order to improve public services, to facilitate the engagement between administration and citizens, so, you know, communication, but also for enforcement and fraud detection. So in our landscape that we've created, there's only about 12% of the cases that we consider to be actively contributing to increasing the open government capabilities of the public sector. Now, careful there with that number. That doesn't mean on the flip side that the other 88% are going actively against it. It simply means it's not their main focus, right? And this is also backed up by another source of evidence that we have. Colleagues of mine last year, they did a small survey among managers and owners of AI cases in the public sector. And also there, they asked them, so what kind of general value do you think, societal value do you think the use of AI in your particular case contributes to? And the result was that most of the case owners and managers, they expect AI to contribute to increasing efficiency, in improving public services, and only a small part actually expected it to be contributing to improving openness and inclusiveness. So why am I saying this? Is simply at the moment, the debate among practitioners as well as academics, the way that we see it, does not look at AI and the potential that it has for improving shared governance. I mean, this is something that I think you also shared in your opening statement. But I would also like to say that it doesn't have to be that way, because if we look at the potential and sort of the few cases that we have, there is potential of using AI in a proactive way in order to improve openness and open governance. Just a few examples to maybe trigger some thoughts. We can use algorithms in order to help us process large public consultation processes, right? So one very concrete example is the European Union has just gone through what they called the Future on the Conference of Europe, a very large consultation process with thousands and millions of contributions. And they used an algorithm in order to structure and sort and analyze the contributions by citizens, because no human capacity would have been able to process all that valuable information coming in from the European citizens, right? So that is a very concrete use. Another is how algorithms can help us promote open data, right? So we see cases where, for example, one very concrete case, where an algorithm was used in order to remove personalized information from documents in order to then make these documents available as open data, respecting privacy regulations, right? So there is another example for you. And the one more maybe is that talking especially about regions, think of machine translation, right? So we have a lot of border regions in Europe, and there's a lot of interaction going on between these regions, but there are still often language barriers, right? So using the potential of machine translation can help us create even more vibrant interactions between the administrations of these different regions, as well as the citizens and the residents of these regions. And the last point that I would like to come back to, and I'm going to ignore your second question because maybe we can, that was just too much for me after lunch. The last point, so I mentioned at the beginning of my statement that the way we're using artificial intelligence at the moment is a lot about improving efficiency and in improving public services. And the way I've been talking about it right now, it seems almost as if those were like two different things. However, there's a correlation between the perceived quality of public services and the trust in government and in governance, right? So we also need to be aware of, by improving public services and improving the processes and internal efficiencies of public administrations, we are also contributing to a general trust in government that will later help us also in new models of shared governance. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We will definitely keep aside the question about democracy for later, definitely. And we are going. Yes, we are please going for our next panelist. We started from the general approach to the observatory to a more concrete landing to our policies, and now we're going increasing in crescendo, going for now an example in cities. And with that, I would like to introduce our next guest. Just please, can you share our slides? Yes, 1 second. Jem, now we'll introduce you. Don't worry.
Be patient. That's okay.
I want just to do it properly. Okay, thank you very much. So please, if you could help in giving it right. Thank you very much. Jen McKenna-Percy. Hello, Jen. Thank you for being here in Barcelona and for joining us within this beautiful library.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
Lovely place, yes. Jem manages the Smart Cities team and Digital Built Environment program at the Greater London Authority. As a leader in climate tech innovation and digital infrastructure, Jem has facilitated strategic partnerships with government, industry, and academia on major climate action initiatives such as the Future Low Carbon Cities in Shanghai and the European Commission Sharing Cities program. We will probably talk about that later. As partnership lead for sharing cities, Jem worked with partners to test a range of integrated data-driven technologies across London, Lisbon, and Milan to help address some of the most pressing urban challenges facing today's cities. Jem's 15 years experience also includes a background in communication, stakeholder management, and public policy. So with this background, Jem, I think that you are the best person to answer these two very, very easy questions that we are having to break the ice, which are, please, if we can have them, how can AI please, thank you. How can AI truly contribute to an inclusive London with public services accessible for all? And how can AI facilitate to address more user-designed services? Jem, the floor is yours.
Lovely. Thank you, Fernando. It's always funny to hear yourself described out loud, isn't it? You think, did I write that? So first, the obvious point is I'm not Theo, as advertised, our CDO, who's here today as well. I work closely with him leading the Smart Cities team, as you say, at the GLA. London has 33 boroughs. We're not the GLA is not a delivery body as such. And at the moment, our focus is very much looking at how to develop a consistent approach across those boroughs, a template or a playbook approach. Combining that with the major funds from private investors and matching to their ESG goals to scale proven digital and data driven technologies to decarbonize London's buildings. That's a major priority for us in London at the moment. And what we'd hope is that a program like that will finally give us big enough and clean enough data sets to be able to meaningfully apply AI. And this is that's certainly relevant to this discussion. So thank you very much for having me today. I was struck from the discussion earlier, particularly the introductions from the advisory committee about the range and the depth of knowledge and expertise in this area, and a real pleasure to be sitting next to the robot lady. I was particularly struck by what you said about the social impact, obviously, of AI in terms of how we ensure that we are using this to improve social inequality rather than letting it add to that challenge and take us backwards. So in terms of London and how AI can meaningfully kind of contribute to what we do there in public sector, public services. Tomorrow you'll be hearing from Theo on data governance and data spaces for AI solutions. But the reason largely that I'm sitting here rather than Theo for this particular discussion does relate to Sharing Cities, the Horizon 2020 program that ran for the last 6 years across London, Lisbon and Milan as lighthouse cities, and Warsaw, Burgash and Bordeaux as our fellow cities. That was 35 partner organizations across public, private and academia, all collaborating together to trial 10 different types of smart technology and develop an evidence base and sufficient data sets to enable scale. That was the real kind of nut that we were trying to crack. But another kind of fundamental principle of that program, there were two really. One, that it was led by cities across each of the lighthouse cities. The municipality or the regional government was the lead. And secondly, that it was led by the needs of citizens. We called it a citizen need-led program, rather than, as happens on occasion, it being led by the solutions, and then those being kind of shoehorned into the needs of citizens. It was led by citizens, and underpinning that entire program was citizen engagement. We had a dedicated work package on citizen engagement, assessing the social impact, but also how we take citizens with us on this journey. How do we build their trust? How do we educate them? How do we reassure them? And of course, ultimately, how do we help them? How do we improve their lives and making sure that this kind of technology wasn't being done to them, but rather with them? So our that work package advised on design sprints for various measures, and also, as I say, advice on how we engage citizens. This largely fell into a kind of digital social market approach. And one example, this was run by Future Cities Catapult, was in Greenwich, where across the 3 lighthouse cities, about 5,000 citizens were engaged across all of these measures. In Greenwich in particular, we ran a demand-side response pilot called Greenwich Energy Hero, which helped residents use less electricity and earn rewards, all the way obviously paving the way to a greener energy market. It was a 12-month trial, and the trial proved very positive, a kind of contributor to assisting the UK with obviously some pretty chronic problems around energy and demand at the moment. It illustrated really what a future could look like, where people are able to adapt their behaviours, they're facilitated to adapt their behaviours, and reduce their electricity. And that won the Innovation in Citizen Engagement Award from Harvard University. But another area just to highlight here on how AI should contribute with citizens at its heart relates to our Mayor Sadiq Khan's manifesto commitment in 2021. He pledged to create an emerging technology charter for London, and this was practical and ethical guidelines for trialling and deploying new data-enabled technology in public services. That has 4 key principles. One is, the first is to be open, the second is to respect diversity, the third to be trustworthy with people's data, and fourth is to be sustainable. I'll just say a very little amount on each one of those, and forgive my notes. My plane was very delayed last night and I got in very late to Barcelona. So in terms of being open, obviously when trialing and deploying emerging technologies, in London we aspire to work in the open as much as we can, sharing our thinking as we progress, and working collaboratively across city authorities. So this includes, for example, setting out in what we call plain English to the public what the technology is, what it can do, why it's being used, and where appropriate the legal and the ethical basis for doing that. We communicate with local authorities proactively who might be affected by the technology, and most importantly also create a feedback loop where we take into account their feedback. In terms of respecting diversity, we obviously believe that human rights principles are at the heart of all of these technologies and how we apply them. In terms of being trustworthy with people's data, we always require safe, secure and useful ways of using and sharing that data to build that trust. And that's sometimes really quite fragile, something that, you know, we take seriously. It takes a long time to build up that trust and not very much for it to be knocked in the public's eyes. And finally, in terms of being sustainable, so to the point this morning that was very interesting about how we link technology use here to goals for net zero carbon in London. We link the two very clearly and follow, for example, business climate guidance in counting the entire life cycle impact of the technology. So just very briefly then on the second question that I've been challenged with, I promised to answer them both. Obviously, there's a number of challenges to using AI when it comes to user design services, and we're all pretty familiar with them, whether it's around accuracy, bias, discrimination, for example, legality, accountability, compliance and control. When Greenwich in London engaged their citizens on the demand side response work, they ran into a number of challenges. Their observations were that firstly, when recruiting users to this kind of work, the time between them first signing up and the service starting is fragile, and the kind of engagement has to be throughout the process. Concepts relating to energy and demand side response can be difficult to communicate, and being creative in how we communicate those is vital, and that of course you know, as I say, trust plays a big role. There are, again, as I say, you'll hear a lot more from Theo tomorrow on these, but just two final examples for how we use AI in user design services. One is around congestion on the underground. So TfL, Transport for London, which are our transport body in London, have worked with Virgin Media to bring Wi-Fi to 97% of our London Underground stations in London. So the aim there is to understand patterns of movement across our network and how customers as a whole operate, not just as individuals. The benefit there obviously is to provide better information to customers and give us a better chance of understanding crowding, collective travel patterns, etc., to bring improvements. And the second example to highlight, which is one that's often more controversial, is facial recognition technology. So in London, we're exploring, or the police are exploring, intelligence-led cameras that are deployed at locations where serious offenders are likely to be present. Critical with that is that for social impact and citizen engagement considerations, local communities and groups are consulted and warned in advance that the cameras are being used. Deployments are overt rather than covert, with signs put up to alert members of the public, and leaflets are even handed out to say, you know, you are being watched, and again, to communicate the purpose of that and to build that trust.
Okay, thank you very much. That gives us another layer of advancing from the observation of the unveiling of this social impact to the definition of policies and the approach to landing into a city strategy for larger London. And now we're increasing even more with the crescendo with our next guest. And I have the pleasure, please have mercy of this middle-aged man that I can nearly read. Okay, thank you very much. So it's Cristina Andersson. Hello, Cristina. Thank you very much for being here with us. She's an entrepreneur and management consultant. Cristina has been working with artificial intelligence and robotics since 2011 as an expert in different EU and national organizations, as well as with several companies. She is a member of the steering group of the Finnish National Artificial Intelligence 4.0 program, led by the Ministry of Employment and Economy. Cristina is chair of the Green Transition Group of the program, chair for the Artificial Intelligence Working Group at the Finnish Standards Association, and member of the board in the Federation of Finnish Enterprises in Helsinki. So here, with this background, Cristina, with your experience in robots that I am very happy to share, please, could you ask this question? Can we become friends of a robot? And could that be a public service in Helsinki? How can we become a superpower of human centrism? The floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. So I think the ice is broken already with all these fantastic inputs here, but I try. And actually my question, Fernando, if you allow me to change the question a little bit. So the question is not how we can become friends with the robots, but how can robots become friends with us? And well, my biggest experience with robots is actually the Finnish national program for robotics and AI in healthcare, which I did with the Ministry of Healthcare and Social Affairs with ministry for 4 years. And well, my experiences are not so good because we had a whole range of robots, from hospitals to rehabilitation to medical dispensing, and well, it shrank into robots at home. And actually not even robots there, but some AI diagnostics and analytics. So it was kind of like the old story of of a tailor who started with a big fabric, and it became smaller and smaller and smaller until it became just a small bag and no suit there. So that is what happened. But I learned a lot about robots. And what I understand now, so there is a robot for any use. There are robotics for everything. The question is, where should you use them? And that's not that many. And so how could robots become friends with us? So first of all, they need to be human citizen centric. There must be an accessibility to these services. And for example, in rehabilitation, there are robots. I just visited Milan. Thank you so much. Where is the Milan friend? Anyway, so visited Milan and I saw a fantastic place called Villa Beretta, where they have robotic rehabilitation from a very old robot, Locomat, to very advanced robotics, exoskeletons and so forth. And this is a way I would like to see the world, that robots really become friends with us so that they can help us with our the very evilest problems. That is something, but they need more than citizens, and this means accessibility. Everyone needs to have access to these robotic systems and also all beneficial AI systems. Great examples there, Jen. Then they need to be human-centric, but human-centric doesn't mean that humans must do everything. So now, for example, in Finland, we have this problem that we don't have even enough nurses to take care of everyone. And actually, there are some nursing homes that need to be closed down for the summer because there are not enough nurses. But no one is considering that we could have technology helping those nurses to do their jobs. So there are without technology, and we have regulation that says that humans must do the work. And so that means that no technology there. So we must change a little bit this thinking that human first. We must think service first, and service for humans first, and not always done by humans. And this doesn't mean that we are throwing our elderly people that we love so much to cold hands of robots. No, it means only that the tasks that are very burdening are given to robots, for example, or AI. So that's number one, was this human citizen part. Then second part is sustainability. Digitalization and ICT creates more CO2 footprint at the moment than aviation, total aviation in the world. So we need to start diminish that footprint. Therefore, AI at the moment, for example, if you watch a video from Netflix, it creates quite a footprint. So the individuals, we need to think about it, but especially the public sector and others that are using heavy digital systems need not only to develop more sustainable systems and use them in sustainable ways, but also re-engineer the systems that are currently in use. Well, that will be a big job, but congratulations to consulting houses and IBMs and all those. And it needs, of course, to be ethical. And thank you for talking so much about inclusivity, because that's, of course, and gender gap and all that. At the moment, that is a big problem still, even though we have been talking about it a lot. But what can we do? For example, if we tweet something stupid in the internet or post something with attitude, so, you know, these AIs, they will be reading it and they will take it into the AI heart at, okay, it's good to talk bad about people in London because there's the guy there, he's always talking about it. So we must stop that. We must talk good things about each other. That's one thing that everybody can do. And the third thing that robots and AI could be good friends with us is that they need to be cost effective. they must be that because it's taxpayers' money. It's my money, it's yours, it's yours. And we cannot just throw money into the air with, for example, projects and pilots that has no aim to become useful in some place. And this I have seen in Finland so much that I know that in each country they have the same. And it's a problem also for startups. And this was very problem with when I was working with the Ministry of Healthcare, that we saw it very practically how hospitals and other healthcare institutions, they pilot these different devices or robots or AIs or whatever. And when the project is over, the pencil just drops down, nobody does nothing anymore. And the startup is there, okay, what about our device? And it can be, there is one in Finland, a medicine dispenser device, a robot actually, and they had this problem all the time, until they got funding from Norway, not from Finland. So, and I think this is a problem. Of course, we love Norwegian money, but it would have been the development would have been much faster if they could have the funding from near, so to speak, in Finland. And yeah, so that's maybe something. Then I wanted to say something about trustworthiness. Yes, that's so important. It's important, but there can become times when we trust AI, but it couldn't be trusted. A friend of mine was in Athens and with a company of 7 people, and she had promised that she will pay for the dinner. And when that time came that she should pay for the dinner, her card didn't work. And she is a very wealthy person and absolutely no problems in that front, but it just didn't work. Luckily, there was somebody who had money to pay for the dinner. And next day she went to the bank, very angry, but they could never tell what was the problem. It was the AI who has been thinking that, let's close the card. And the bank couldn't do anything else than just open the card and state that there is nothing wrong here. Here is your card. But we must also learn that if something happens, it's not catastrophe. If your card doesn't work, you must know that, okay, it's not a problem, it will solve, and this is not the end of the world. We older people, we know the time when the card was closed, it was kind of a big shame that, okay, you're poor and you are in bankruptcy and everything, but nowadays it's not that anymore. So that is something, and we have now time to study this until quantum computing comes, because then there is no transparency anymore. And so I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but I just please
you can, no problem.
What?
No problem.
Yeah, maybe we can move forward, but with this way, and in Helsinki, I can say that there is one thing that is good in Helsinki now to use robots, and there were 11 new hospitals in Finland, and the biggest one in Helsinki, and it has been optimized for robots. They have actually not ordered any robots yet, but it's optimized anyway. So bravo, Helsinki.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I have to have a warm-up, right? I just advanced that we will have also some minutes and time by the end of the meeting, because now we are going to open a bit the debate, and I please ask you to be as proactive as you wish and take the word as much as you can without waiting for me to giving you the word, right? And then we will have also the chance for the attendees to have any question that I'm certain that has been inspiring some thoughts. So it has been really difficult for me. I don't know if we are going to start with quantum computing. No, let's leave it for another day, please. Yes, but I liked finishing with that. Yes, good point. And but probably I will mention a number of things, right? And please just feel free to jump in. Since we are talking about the citizen-centric perspective, I was very interested in understanding this concept of, okay, you mentioned, I think, Albert, things are changing at our homes. So it is not that it is happening in our workplace or when we are having a plane, or no, at our homes, in the same place where we sleep and we eat, and we have our relationship with our family. So I would like to bring this in, the homes, how homes are changing. How do you perceive that homes could be changing? And the second line, maybe, which would be related to the behavioral change, another of the components that you have been mentioning, right? Behavioral change. So it is artificial intelligence is providing us potential new ways of interacting, not only with our public services, but also, as you mentioned, Alberto, as well, with our lives, you and I. Now we are probably having some AI happening around in this conversation, right? So what do you think if we start with these two keywords, the homes and the behavioral change? And please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I could start with homes, how homes are changing. And for example, the elderly care in Finland is a regulation that people must stay at home as long as possible, even though they are old and weak and so forth. So now we are trying to find solutions how use technology without the home becoming a tech center, without all these gadgets around. So that is something. And another development going on is from USA. I have found the hospital. So yes. So the care is moving more and more towards homes. So how can we develop home-friendly technology that is technology, but actually doesn't spoil the good home atmosphere? And yeah, there are quite good examples. And in Helsinki, in my town, so the homes are small. They are usually 1 room or 2 rooms and a kitchen and a toilet. And so this is we haven't found actually, because now the problem is that all the technologies, they are separate technology. There is one for medicine dispensing, there is other one to helping for something else, and the third one. So I'm really looking forward to time when we have a multitasking robot. And there is in England, actually, there is a Yuba robot, which is fantastic. It's a concept, it's not yet, but when you go to Bristol and West England University, say hi, because that's, I have maximum respect for their work, what they are doing there. And I think if there are coming solutions, it will come from there.
Absolutely. I agree with what you said, and going back to what you said earlier, actually, as well, you're absolutely right. There are all sorts of positive social impacts to be had by applying data-driven technology and AI to people's homes. And it's important that we don't just think environmentally about that we think about the potential for example, health and social care. So you may have an elderly or a socially vulnerable resident in an estate, a block of housing. And of course, where you say, what might this look like when we apply technology? Well, if that socially vulnerable resident was to be out past approved route time, such as 10 o'clock in the evening, then the technology would automatically alert somebody to help them. Though, so it's a lot, I think, in the health and social care space about preserving people's independence for as long as possible, which obviously in turn reduces a massive economic burden. I don't have the figures to hand, but the impact for health and social care, environmental, economically is huge, obviously, in applying these technologies. But going back to what we said earlier, you absolutely have to bring people along with you. These are people's homes. You have to respect the integrity of their houses. And of course, it's complex. In London, we have a lot of estates, a lot of housing blocks and flats and things like that. And of course, within that, you have all sorts of different typologies. You have different types of ownership, whether people based in social housing or private, for example, whether they rent or whether they own. And it takes a lot of effort to design the right kind of citizen engagement for these technologies, taking into account the different kind of typologies and of course the different demographics as well. You know, I think with any of this work, you can't apply a kind of homogenous approach because we're all different. We live in very different homes. We have different priorities. So you have to make the effort there. So in answer to your question about what it might look like, I mean, we have a challenge in London at the moment, given obviously the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis, to start with the basics, the insulation, etc. And then we're looking at this program to then apply the digital and data-driven technologies. But as Cristina says, it's really important to integrate the technology as much as possible, to look at people's kind of whole lives rather than the home in isolation. What kind of mobility solutions do they need? Where do they work? What type of jobs, etc. And we have to ensure that we're using standards correctly to make sure these technologies are interoperable, that people aren't burdened with lots of kind of dysfunctional types of technology, because of course, as I say, that trust diminishes very quickly if it's not functional and if the value isn't evident to people pretty quickly.
I couldn't agree more with the things that have been said in relation to how we should encourage people to use AI sensibly at home, especially when it comes to caring for older people. I think there is also the potential of making sure, especially in some contexts where different generations live together, and that's probably the case in Spain, in some Mediterranean countries, where the transfer of knowledge between younger and older populations can happen. And we have to make sure that we are boosting that possibility in a way that older people can use technology in the most effective way, not as dependents of technology. And that doesn't necessarily mean that younger people have the ability to have a very good supervision or control of AI systems. But generally, we can say that growing up with technology is a great asset these days. And transferring that knowledge to older generations, and at the same time spend time with older generations, is a good opportunity to foster relationships between humans, between people at home. And that can happen at home, but also can happen at schools, at community centers, and so on and so forth. So we have to make sure, as I said at the beginning, to make sure that the relationships with technology take place between individuals that really can make transfers of information. And I think there is a great deal of potential in Europe, because we know from the European Commission perspective that we're moving towards human-centric. But we have to define in many ways what this human-centric means. So we can somehow put not only older people, but also younger people and individuals who have knowledge at the center of this transformation. And I think adult children will have a great deal to say. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would like to mention has to do with this capacity to really think about the social element before we apply a technology. So people here are talking about mostly things that relate to aging, not that relate to technology, to aging. People living longer, having a longer life expectancy. Of course, there's an element that has to do with technology, because we're using better medicines, we have less infections, more degenerative diseases that to a certain extent delay our mortality to later ages. But we can think also about the things, not only the things that are taking place at home, but outside home, that are not related to technology before we apply a technology. And that's what we also mean by social impact of AI. So do not, especially if there are any startup people here in the room, do not design solutions without thinking about the social impact. Think about the social impact first, and then design a solution. And that can be brought up home, they can use those solutions at community level for schools and so on and so forth. But please do not apply your solutions widespread as if that was, you know, something general that you could basically apply anywhere. And that's unfortunately what is happening in many sectors, including the sector of caring. Probably one of the sectors where this is widely used. And this is obviously problematic because, as you said, there are very different demographics. There are very different types of households. There are different types of vulnerabilities. And so imagine if this is one context, the European context, imagine what is happening in other places of the world. So we really need to embrace the complexity of these solutions, but in a way that we don't think first of technology, we think first of the societal problems in a way that we can somehow push forward for better solutions.
Before, Peter, I know that you want to contribute to something. I just wanted to emphasize something which I found very interesting in this point is from homes, we are arriving that there is an element of capacity building at homes for the digital literacy. And this element is bottom up. I mean, it's children teaching parents and grandparents, right? So eventually that has to do with public services? Well, probably yes. Probably there is an element here to investigate to what extent family or these flux of knowledge can help to the development of these public services. Sorry, Peter.
Thanks, Fernando. I think I can actually, what I wanted to say, I think I can make the link to what you just said. So I think those are super interesting contributions by the other panelists, and looking at what I'm working on. So how can we use AI in the public sector and for improving public services? There is a situation where I mean, AI can make your life very convenient, right? I mean, just think about your daily life, your mapping service in order to get from one place to another, your streaming service that recommends actually maybe music or movies that you like. So, there is, in our daily lives, we're using algorithms and they're really making our lives very convenient, and that increases the expectations also on the public sector. The public sector needs to be able to keep up with providing high quality services on a daily basis, right? And that means the public sector will also make use in a reasonable and responsible way of algorithms, right? The issue, however, there's a few issues there. Like one is, and they're related. There are different attitudes of, it might be the same person, and my attitude changes whether I'm a client, I'm a user of something, or whether I become a citizen, right? I think we've seen that a little bit during the pandemic, where there were different attitudes, in terms of sharing data for COVID tracing or something like that with the public sector. Some people, depending on the different countries, were very skeptical whether, while at the same time they were sharing massive amounts of data with private companies whose services they were using, right? So there's this thing. And the other thing, there is sometimes a bit this attitude, the public sector is lagging behind, is not as innovative, and so on and so on. And I don't want to judge that statement. What I would like to argue is that these two things, these attitudes and this perception that the public sector is lagging behind with technological innovation, are a bit related because of the special role of the public sector in our lives, right? The public sector in many ways is a monopolist, right? If I become unemployed and I depend on social benefits, unemployment subsidies, and so on, there's only one provider. I cannot change companies. If I don't like the way how my social messaging system or this or that platform is using algorithms because I believe it's wrong, it's discriminatory, I can decide not to use it. I can often not decide not to use a public service depending on the service. So that puts a lot of responsibility on the public sector for getting it right, simply because the stakes are so much higher. and that means we really need to put an emphasis on trying to get it right. And as Albert said, trying to think not solution driven, not like technology driven, not technology solution driven, but like try to think about the social implication, try to think of the entire ecosystem of things that I'm doing. If I place an algorithm into that system, into that social system, into the use of how people are living and how they're using public services, which repercussions could it have? So I'm very much saying the public sector should and will use algorithms because we have to. We owe it to the users, to the residents, to the citizens, and to the taxpayers to provide high quality public services. But we really need to make sure we get it right, because if we don't, it's disaster.
To what I'm wondering, to what extent this is linked to this previous question of shared governance, right? Of our public services, right? Since now we are having an enormous role with our data and with our specific actions in the co-design of these services, probably, which is the challenge that our public service servants are having now in order to integrate us as the taxpayers in the definition of these particular services. I'm wondering if you are having any example of these co-design processes, of this specific participation of the citizens in the implementation of AI solutions, and how this has been affecting also the final results. Would you share any specific, for instance, in the terms of robotics or healthcare, or together with the solutions that have been developed in London, maybe you have been integrating the citizens in these processes of co-design, or do you have any experience about that?
Jump in. Well, I was just thinking that Theo actually is talking about data governance tomorrow. I don't know whether, Theo, this is one that you want to take as a preview of what you'll say tomorrow.
Oh, so we had the spoiler now, yeah.
Yeah, sure. What was the direct question?
The question was to what extent this role of citizens in the co-design of the new services can be associated to new models of shared governance of our cities and of our public institutions. Since we are inviting for the co-design of these services, but at the end of the day, there is IP involved there. There is elements of legitimacy for the final use of the solution.
I think co-design is often an overused word, and it means many, like smart cities. It means many different things to many different people. But it's a good word to use. But I think the way we'd approach it would be from the kind of past digital transformation work, which was popularized by the government's digital service in the UK. And they started creating digital services along the lines of a set of principles, which enshrined agile methodology, so iteration, and a clear understanding of what user need is. And as we look to creating more data services in the future, we need to apply the same discipline. And in fact, we are applying the same discipline as we did for digital services. So that is clearly understanding what your outcomes are, and also what the needs of your users are. Now, a lot of data so far with AI, the user is another public sector worker rather than a citizen. I think you probably find, more users or end users in use of AI and transport network, perhaps. But the use of AI in other cases is sort of like, how do we make a public sector worker better at their job, serving citizens? So in short, the the really important thing for cities to do is to put in place that consistent methodology. So just as the same way you would want to create consistent digital services right across your city, you would ask for the same consistency with data projects. And I think that is more of a difficult ask because people have had a tendency historically to go, oh, here's a data project, I'll just do it this way, or I'll bring these people in to do it. And the inconsistency in that approach, I think, tends against transparency.
Thank you very much for jumping into the session, Theo, for the invitation, for the blessed invitation. So now I think that maybe I could open the door to any question that you're wishing to have. So I invite you to prepare your questions and to share with us if you wish. And please, if you would like to raise your hand, otherwise we would continue with the conversation. Any question that you would like to put now to our attendees, to our panel?
Yes, I have a question to the panel. It's when we talk about accessibility and reachability of citizens or users or those, so we are talking about people who actually are reachable, but then there are, for example, loneliness, which is one of the biggest pandemics of our times. So really isolated people, we cannot, how can we find these people with digital means? And this is a big question, and I don't have an answer. I have been thinking about this a lot, but I don't know how. One thing is that they are probably watching television, so there could be some kind of, you know, you could click something on television, are you lonely? And then you go somewhere, I don't know, but this is my question.
Loneliness. Any
I mean,
Jem,
I think
as
a first thought, it would be to not assume. I mean, certainly from a perspective of working in a public administration, that we may know all about AI and the technologies, but I wouldn't supposed to know about what are the complex challenges of somebody, for example, living in isolation, what are their needs. And so I think in terms of ensuring that you bring in the ecosystem, bringing in people that are expert in that element and match that together with your expertise in the technologies that you're talking about, and really kind of co-develop those solutions in a way that is meaningful, going back to ensuring that the needs of that particular citizen is the heart of what solution is being developed rather than the other way around. And I think starting with people that know on the whether it's health and social care or any other area is really important to ensure that you actually have a collaboration of people, a cross-section of groups, whether it's from public services across to private, across to academia, charity sectors, for example, have huge knowledge and expertise, and often have started thinking in this space as well, and would welcome, coupling that together with an expert in the kind of technologies to see what the art of the possible is. They know the challenges, but may not understand the full kind of extent of what might be possible. I think when you marry different kind of areas of expertise together, then you get something that's really more meaningful and far closer to then solving the challenge that a citizen has.
No, I definitely. I just wanted to mention something related to DT4 regions that probably in our previous debates, we were thinking too much about a platform so that civil servants can have about mutual learning in digital technologies, right? But eventually what I am perceiving here is that the actual challenge is, at least this is what I read from your words, is that how these technologies are really connecting with the actual challenges of how do you apply this for those who are alone? How do you apply this for those that are not having a mobile phone? How do you apply this for those who are not going to have a camera? How, in order to make this global approach for an inclusive AI. So probably the discussions of this mutual learning community could be understanding how technology enables this to disappear in a horizon as a public service as well. And this is a very interesting reflection. And eventually, I think that DT4Regions would be a very original platform for that to happen, because it will not be about how to use a digital twin, but it will be how to use well the digital twin with these subjects that public servants you are having in general. I don't know if this sounds to you something that could probably be of relevance, Cristina, as well, yeah? A hand in the public.
Yes, of course, I think this could be one of the biggest challenges that we have. So I would be happy to talk about this. Actually, I think in England, there are no lonely people anymore because Theresa May appointed Minister of Loneliness. So probably the project is successful, and we could have some good examples.
That seems very unlikely. We've been very lonely for the last few years, haven't we now? More so now.
What I wanted to come back to is actually what Theo brought up, right? So that many times sort of the end user of an algorithm is another public servant, and we do have, based on our, I'm continuing with the product placement here, right? So we have a bit of data on that. So in our 686 cases, we analyzed that around 45, in about 45% of the cases, it's a government to citizen sort of interaction. So there is, in a little bit less than half the cases, it is actually the case that a citizen or a resident would be the end user, would be at the receiving end of a service that is making use of an algorithm. 43% is government to government, so inside another public servant, and so on. So this underlines a little bit what you said, that a lot of times, you know, the way we're using algorithms is to improve internal services. And I tried to make the case before that that's not a bad thing. We also need that, right? It's just to put a bit of evidence into what we're talking about. So combining what I just said, so roughly about half the cases that we have, we see an interaction. So the end user of a service run on an algorithm is a citizen or a resident of an area. In the survey that I mentioned before, and I think we could do better with the representativeness of the survey, so take that with a grain of salt, but it just gives you a bit of a hint. We also asked the managers and the users of the cases in how far citizens were involved in the design of this service, right? By opening up the input data, by opening up the algorithm, by opening up the output data, and having some sort of interaction. Now, my very personal opinion is that, you know, public services and public administrations tend to over-report their citizen engagement. So we you know, because it makes us look good. But even with that in mind, I think only about roughly a quarter, really rule of thumb here, roughly a quarter of all the cases only said that they open at one stage of the development, of the piloting, of the implementation. They co-designed this with citizens as end users. So there is still a lot of potential for involving citizens in doing that. But my personal, also not being a technology expert, but having more of a social science background, is if we as public administrations are still struggling ourselves with understanding what AI is and what algorithms are and how they work, how can we possibly have a meaningful conversation with our citizens about using that? I say we should do that, but I would just like to highlight the challenge of doing that, since we ourselves are completely sometimes overwhelmed with how to use that technology. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to that point, and I completely agree with Theo, and also with you, and with all the comments that you're making. But I wanted to raise the point that I think when it comes to engagement with citizens, we cannot really just present that. You just really mentioned that as an operation of sort of something that make us feel good because we done it once and then we deploy the system and we just trust the system that it will do it relatively well because there was some planning about participation before implementing the solution. It has to be a very dynamic system. Primarily from the very reason that these sort of events, the situations, the individuals that will have to use the system will vary constantly. It will be so complex, the situation that we will have to face, and the civil servant behind will basically see that. So we have to be aware that when we do this sort of model participation, if you want, co-design, we are really on top of it all the time. But we don't have the infrastructure, that's the problem. It's incredibly costly to build infrastructures that somehow monitor not the individuals that use the system, but the system itself. And that is going to be crucial in the future to make sure that whenever we have a situation that really goes beyond our set of criteria, our ones and zeros, and we have to face that situation, that individual with those particular circumstances, we have an answer for that person. And we have a very transparent answer, but we are accountable, but also responsible for that answer. And we don't say, oh, the machine doesn't let me do that. No, we can't do that anymore. So we have to have that dynamic system that monitors our systems on the basis that there is participation, constant participation all the time. And that's very much related to social engagement. But from the point of view of making sure that all individuals are participating, and of course, that's incredibly difficult, vulnerable populations who basically might, in some cases, say, I prefer the machine than the human, because I don't trust these humans anymore with all these biases. And we have experiences of that in our project, where migrants from the US don't trust local authorities anymore to cross the border. They prefer the machine to say yes or no, because they feel, they perceive that they're free of biases. So we have to work a lot towards a system that is constantly monitored, dynamically intervened by individuals, not only from the civil service, but also from civil society. And that's going to cost time, of course, that's going to cost money. And of course, we have to build this together. I mean, there's no way we're going to let just one particular company to build all this for us.
Yes, this whole world of perceptions that that people is having about AI, which has probably become a label, right, or a blurred marketing target, right, that more than a discipline or something that can be explainable anymore. Otto, I think that we are reaching to the end of the. Okay, please, can you introduce the online question?
There is a focus on interoperability of data and solutions. However, so far, the consistency of the user's experience is often not taken into consideration. Although it could help users and public servants with lower digital skills to accept this solution in an easier way. Is there any thought of implementing a common theme user experience in a DT4Regions platform? Is there any thought of implementing a common theme user experience in the DT4Regions platform?
Okay. This is very interesting. I think I've understood the question. I will give my approach to it. And as far as I understand, this has a little bit to do with this curation of the DT stories. So it is not only that we have to have stories, we have to have good stories that are accessible to all, that are usable to all, right? And that eventually that are user-friendly. So what we are going to have, if that is the question, I think that the question goes in this way.
Yeah, I think that the relevant part is that how we help users and public servants with lower digital skills to be part of the platform.
Yes, there's an element of accessibility.
Yeah.
And then there was another element of interoperability, which is that this can be connected to other platforms and to other things. So yeah, what we are going to do is to prototype the dynamics around the DT stories. And this will happen during the Open Living Lab Days session in 23rd of September. So we will need to understand now how this curation of these stories can work, and which are the dynamics that allows for this plain access, right, to stories accessible to all, not only for technicians in the public servants. And at least this is the challenge that we are having in DT4 regions. We still have 10 minutes for any other question from the public here in Barcelona, in the library of the Palau Pedro Alves. Okay, because I have a lot of notes and questions here, but okay, so we were talking about perceptions, right? And probably we were talking about perceptions of them favored or perceptions of those that have lower access to technologies, right? But probably there is the other side of the coin as well, no? Those that are willing to contribute and willing to participate. And I would like to share something that happened to one of my students in Open Innovation. So they were developing an essay, and in this essay, this was about they had to provide an innovative solution in an open innovation process, the degree of smart cities, linking with living labs, etc. And they decided to do something related with blockchain and AI in order to provide the traceability of the public servants and their budgets. Not low, not low aspiration, right? So 1 week before delivering the essay, one student told me, Fernando, can we speak by the end of the lecture? Yes, of course we can speak, yes. So what do you want? No, I prefer to wait to the end of the lecture to speak alone with you. Okay, so there was a lot of mystery around that. So he told me, okay, look, I'm really enjoying this essay about blockchain and AI. And my question is it ethical if I propose to drop down the Spanish democracy? And my question was, why exactly would you like to do that? I mean, at a revolution? So, no. I mean about Spanish democracy because this is my context. But the point is that blockchain allows for a transversal approach to traceability, right? And for the public authorities. And I want this to happen, but the current state of things are not allowing this to happen. So we have the possibility of developing completely new models of societies thanks to these new technologies. So eventually I said, okay, you can justify it if it is not violent and whatever. So Peter, yes, we came back to the question of how artificial intelligence challenges our democracies. So I would like to end a bit this conversation because we are losing. The time has been dropping down from our fingers. With this idea about futures, how do you conceive this future interaction of people? How do you perceive this integration and changing, how this is going to change the way in which our public administrations will evolve? If you have thought about that, if you could give 2 cents about it.
We were privileged enough to hear a great philosopher, Spanish philosopher, a few weeks ago at the opening of the seminar series of our observatory. His name is Daniel Innerarity. He actually talked about the relationship between AI and democracies. And I was at the beginning taking the title of his seminar was Are Democracies Imperial Because of AI? I was thinking, oh, this is going to be like a very interesting seminar. And I was just anticipating a great deal of negativity. Just we are on the verge of breaking down or basically collapsing. But his talk was very positive instead. So I'm just taking that, borrowing that sort of sense that to a certain extent, there were 2 or 3 things important that at least that's how I perceived. One of them was that it is pushing us to do things more clearly, more using sort of systems of transparency. So the chain of reasons are better in a way. If you think about how we decide, especially behind closed doors in local, regional, and central governments, there's a lot of discretionary decisions. We just don't take for granted that people will understand that we make that particular decision and people will understand. Well, when we use AI systems, if you do that, you'll be in real trouble. Especially if you consider the state of things. People will want to know, why are you making that decision? And the good thing of AI systems, if you build good AI systems, is that you have a record, a registry, an automated criteria that tells you, okay, you put 1 here and 0 there, right? So you got a weight. So you're putting a weight on that 1, which might be, I don't know, something more democratic than less democratic. So there is the first point that is probably quite positive. But the second one is that we are a lot more interrelated. Because of technology, we have the capacity to really communicate very fast about things that are quite unacceptable for democracies. And that mobilizes people very quickly. Sometimes it can be dangerous, of course, but generally speaking, what we've seen with the Arab Springs, but also with other movements, social movements, is that there is a positive element of that. And then finally, if I may, there is the rediscovery of ethics. People kind of took for granted that some philosophers centuries ago were talking about things like responsibility or autonomy, or things that basically related to sustainability without actually saying it explicitly. And we are rediscovering that because of technology, because we have in place now something that really makes us think about the presence or the absence of something. It's so disruptive that we have to think about in those terms. And that's democracy. Democracy is exactly the same. You have presence or absence. And that's a very good thing of our list. That's how many of us see technology. You have to think in those terms. In some ways, it'll be unsustainable if you want to have it everywhere. But in some ways, it will be very good if you have it. So we need to think in terms of how we see technology and democracy in a very similar way.
Thank you. We are arriving to the last 5 minutes of our debate. It was really fast. It flies by. So please, I kindly ask you to contribute. Yes, Peter, would you like to mention something?
Just because I dumped that question a bit at the beginning, because when I read it, I was like, that's just that's too much. That's too much. That's giving me too much of a headache. But I like what Albert said, that it's forcing us a little bit on to think about very, very much and very carefully and closely about how we want to live together. But about sort of AI and the impact on democracy, there's so many things to unpack, right? There's the potential impact of AI on the public sphere and the public realm. Think about misinformation, think about misinformation campaigns, trying to influence the outcome of elections, and that can be, I think, horrifying. There's many stories about how AI affects public services and discrimination happening here because the input data was discriminatory, right? And of course that's also an aspect of democracy. If we exclude certain groups of people, and often especially the most vulnerable people, from receiving public services, and that's also, again, that's horrifying. So there's a lot of examples out there that can really, give you sleepless nights about, the future of democracy in the context of AI. But I think there's also there's also positive examples, right? Think about AI as a tool to give power to the people, right? So think about citizen science initiatives that are using algorithms in order to analyze and to let's say the pollution data and the environmental performance of their city, of their region, and in order to hold government accountable, right? So it can be a powerful tool here. Think about the use of algorithms in journalism, and especially data journalism. So where you have then people that use an algorithm in order to spot corruption or to spot the misuse of funds and so on and so on, in order to then hold government again accountable for that. So, you know, it is for me, I think we're very much at the beginning of this debate, and there's cause for concern, and there's cause maybe also potential for regulation, but there's also a lot of cause for optimism and for hope. So maybe I'll stop on the hopeful note, so we don't all go sad out of this debate.
Thank you very much. Yes, you touched the regulatory learning as well. We could be for another whole debate about that. Yes, but I would kindly ask you to give you your final sentences to close the debate, Cristina.
Now working. Okay, so 30 seconds. So in answer to your question, absolutely, in terms of the future, you know, decision making for decision makers, enabling their decision making is obviously the kind of a vast element of this, in answer to your question, and we've all shared examples of that value. So not to recap that, I think in terms of for me, social inclusion and exclusion, where we're talking about society and the future for society, there's potential at both ends of that kind of spectrum in this, and my plea, I think, would be to avoid assumptions. So to Albert's point about the citizen that preferred the interaction with the robot, you know, that's very, very valid and interesting. But of course, going back to the point we were making earlier, on the other end of things, we shouldn't presume that, for example, an elderly person going to the post office might want that to be automated. We know that's more efficient, and there's, you know, a financial saving there. But of course, that may be the only human interaction with the cashier that person has in a week. That's the kind of sad reality. So I think, going back to the isolation point, bringing in subject experts, the future is only if we do this together and bring in all aspects of the ecosystem, and don't make assumptions. And then to Peter's point earlier, you know, big questions remain in terms of the ethics around this. But I was struck, I suppose, applying that to the kind of communication and how we communicate, and we shouldn't, you know, suppose that given that it's tricky for the likes of us that work in this space to understand the full extent of this technology sometimes. How is it that we're going to ensure that citizens that have a day job or other pressures, family pressures or financial pressures, you know, we shouldn't presuppose that they should take the time to understand it. I think there's a balance, though, in the amount of information potentially, and you asked me to us all to try and be provocative if we could. You know, there's a question about how much information is too much information to give to a citizen, because, you know, cynically you could say, if you bombard, you could say you're being transparent and completely open and giving a citizen the kind of full extent of information around a particular technology and its various use cases.
Just noise.
It's just noise. And actually, if you bombard them, you have the opposite. You're doing the opposite, which is actually excluding them from the important information. You know, we need to kind of do the legwork on that, and not turn people off. Help people to see the value with appropriate ways of kind of communicating it.
You have the honor and momentum of closing this debate, Cristina. So
thank you so much. Okay, so this is a very important question about democracy and AI, because our European way of living and our democracy is really in full pressure now. How can we go on? The Russian aggression doesn't only make Ukrainians suffer in a horrific way, but also there is an enormous burst of carbon dioxide in the air all the time. And even though what we do, it keeps on coming, and then the global hunger, all this. So we need to solve these problems. And European Union is committed to solve these problems. But how can we use AI, for example, to simulate the best and optimize solutions to this? What are we going to do? And these are really, really big questions. But I really believe that we are going to solve, because we have solved these before. And now when we solved the last time these kind of problems, we didn't have AI, we didn't have robots, we didn't have big data, we didn't have all these analytics. Now we have, and now we have this opportunity really to take care of European values, democracy, and the missions of no one left behind, and to do no significant harm. So I believe in a good future, even though now our geopolitics looks quite horrible, but in the future it will be better. Thank you.
No, thank you for providing this message. Thank you, Cristina, Jane, Pete, and Albert. It's been a pleasure to share, I think that for all to share this debate with you. And I think that is a commitment also for all the partners in DT4Regions to find the right questions. And we advanced today identifying the right questions more than the specific answers. That for that we will have the live and music. So thank you very much to all.